My stepfather forced me into drugs, then cut me out of his will like I meant nothing. My name is Ian Malik. I'm 24 years old, and I used to believe that family meant safety. I don't believe that anymore. I grew up in a small house with peeling paint and a mango tree in the backyard. It wasn't much, but it was peaceful. My mom worked long hours, but she always came home smiling. And for a long time, it was just the two of us. Then she met him. His name was Farid. At first, he seemed perfect. He brought gifts. He laughed loudly. He told stories that made my mom forget how tired she was. And when he looked at me, he smiled like he wanted to be my friend. I was 12 when they got married. That's when everything started to change. At first, it was small things. He would correct me in front of others, even when I wasn't wrong. He'd say things like, "You need to toughen up," or, "The world won't be kind to boys like you." My mom would just laugh it off. "He's trying to help," she'd say. I wanted to believe her. I really did. But Farid's kindness had rules. When my mom was around, he treated me like a son. He'd ask about school, pat my back, and call me champ. But when she wasn't there, his tone changed. He became colder. Sharper. Like I was something he needed to fix. Or remove. When I turned 15, he started paying more attention to me, not in a good way. "You don't have many friends," he said one evening, leaning against the kitchen counter. "I have enough," I replied quietly. He shook his head. "No, you don't. You stay inside too much. You need to learn how to live." "I'm fine," I said. He smiled. That smile. It always made my stomach feel tight. "We'll fix that," he said. I didn't know then what he meant. But I would soon. A few weeks later, he knocked on my door. "Get dressed," he said. "I'm taking you out." "Where?" "You'll see." I hesitated, but something in his voice told me I didn't have a choice. So I went. We drove across the city, far from anywhere I'd been before. The streets were louder, messier. Music poured out of houses. People stood in groups, laughing too loudly. "This is where real life happens," he said. I didn't like it. "Come on," he added, opening the car door. Inside the house, the air felt heavy. The lights were dim, and the music shook the walls. People I didn't know were talking, laughing, moving like nothing mattered. I wanted to leave. Then Farid handed me a drink. "Just relax," he said. "I don't drink," I replied. He leaned closer. "Don't embarrass me." That was the first time I felt it. Fear. Not loud. Not obvious. Just quiet, and heavy. So I took the glass. That was the first step. I wish I could say I stopped there. But I didn't. Because that night, for the first time in a long time, I felt like I belonged somewhere. And Farid? He knew exactly what he was doing. After that night, things changed quickly. Too quickly. Farid started taking me out more often. At first, it was once a week. Then twice. Then it felt like every chance he got, he was pulling me into that same world. "You're loosening up," he'd say, like he was proud. I wasn't loosening up. I was losing control. But I didn't understand that yet. At those parties, people didn't ask questions. They didn't care who you were or where you came from. All that mattered was that you fit in. And the easiest way to fit in was to say yes. Yes to the drinks. Yes to the pills. Yes to everything. Farid made it seem normal. "Everyone does it," he'd say. "It's not a big deal. You're just having fun." But it stopped being fun very fast. At home, my life started falling apart. I couldn't focus on school. My grades dropped. Teachers started calling my mom. I came home late, sometimes not at all. And every time something went wrong, Farid was there. Calm. Controlled. Concerned. I'm worried about him, he'd tell my mom. He's changing. I'd stand there, trying to explain. He's the one, but my mom would shake her head. Enough, Ayan. Stop blaming others. Blaming others. The words hurt more than anything. Because the truth sounded like a lie. And his lies sounded like the truth. One day, everything broke. I was called into the school office. There was a bag on the table. Small. White. I knew exactly what it was. We found this in your locker, the principal said. My heart stopped. That's not mine, I said quickly. Are you sure? He asked. I nodded. I didn't put that there. But it didn't matter. Because when my mom arrived, Farid was with her. And he already looked disappointed. I tried to help you, he said quietly, shaking his head. That sentence crushed me. Because suddenly, I looked exactly like the person he had been describing. A problem. A failure. Someone who needed fixing. That day changed everything. I was suspended. Sent to rehab. Pulled away from everything I knew. And the worst part? My mom stopped looking at me the same way. There was fear in her eyes. Disappointment. Doubt. And Farid? He stayed right by her side. Comforting her. Guiding her. Controlling the story. I didn't realize it then. But by the time I understood the truth, it was already too late. Because I wasn't just trapped in addiction anymore. I was trapped in his version of who I was. And escaping that, would be the hardest thing I'd ever do. Rehab felt like a different world. Everything was quiet there, but not the peaceful kind of quiet. It was the kind that made you hear your own thoughts too clearly. For the first few days, I didn't talk to anyone. I just sat by the window and kept asking myself the same question again and again, how did my life get here? I wasn't a bad kid. I didn't go looking for trouble. Trouble was brought to me, and handed to me like a gift. The counselors said recovery starts when you accept the truth. But the truth I knew and the truth everyone believed were two very different things. According to them, I had made choices. I had fallen into the wrong crowd. I had lost control. According to me, I had been pushed. Slowly. Carefully. Like someone guiding a piece on a chessboard. Weeks turned into months. The fog in my head began to clear. My body stopped craving the things that once felt necessary. But something else replaced it. Anger. Not loud anger. Not the kind that shouts. It was quieter than that. Deeper. The kind that sits in your chest and waits. When I finally came home, nothing felt the same. The house looked familiar, but it didn't feel like mine anymore. My mom hugged me, but it was different. Softer. Careful. Like she was afraid I might break again. And Farid, he stood behind her, watching me with that same calm expression, like he had been expecting this version of me all along. I'm glad you're better, he said. I didn't answer. Because I knew he didn't mean it. Life after rehab was harder than rehab itself. People didn't trust me anymore. Neighbors whispered. Old friends stopped calling. Even simple things, like sitting at the dinner table, felt heavy. Every mistake I made, no matter how small, became proof that I hadn't really changed. And Farid made sure of that. If I forgot something, he'd sigh loudly. If I came home late, he'd raise an eyebrow. If I stayed quiet, he'd say I was hiding something. It was like I couldn't win. Like every path led back to the same place. You need to rebuild trust, he would say. But the truth was, he never planned to give it back. One night, I heard him talking on the phone. His voice was low, but I could still hear enough to understand. "He's not a problem anymore," he said. "Everything went exactly how we planned." My heart started pounding. I moved closer to the door, barely breathing. Yeah, the school thing sealed it. No one questions it now. I froze. The school thing. The locker. It wasn't just a guess anymore. It was real. But before I could hear more, the floor creaked under my foot. The call ended instantly. The door opened, and Farid stood there, staring at me. For a moment, neither of us spoke. Then he smiled. "You should be sleeping," he said calmly. I wanted to say something. I wanted to shout, to accuse, to finally tell the truth. But the words wouldn't come out. Because deep down, I knew what would happen. No one would believe me. So I said nothing. And that silence was exactly what he wanted. Time passed, and I started building a life outside that house. I got a small job. Then another. I saved money. Eventually, I moved out. It wasn't a big place, just a small room with cracked walls and a window that barely opened, but it was mine. And for the first time in years, I could breathe without feeling watched. I focused on staying clean. Every day was a fight, but I kept going. Not for them. Not for anyone else. For me. But even as I moved forward, the past stayed with me. It followed me in quiet moments. In memories. In the unanswered questions that refused to fade. Why? Why would he do all this? What did he gain from breaking me? I didn't have the answers yet. But I would. Because one day, the truth wouldn't just whisper in the dark. It would stand in the light. And when it did, everything would change. Years passed before I heard his name again. By then, I had rebuilt something that looked like a life. It wasn't perfect, but it was stable. I had a steady job, a routine, and most importantly, control over myself. The chaos he had created no longer ruled me. Or at least, that's what I thought. Then one evening, my phone rang. It was my mom. Her voice was quiet. Fragile. "He's gone," she said. I didn't need to ask who. Farid was dead. For a long moment, I didn't feel anything. No sadness. No anger. Just emptiness. It was like hearing about the end of a storm that had already destroyed everything. The damage was done. His absence didn't fix it. "I think you should come," she added softly. So I did. The funeral was small but formal. People stood in neat lines, dressed in black, speaking in low voices. They talked about him like he was a good man. A kind man. Someone who cared deeply for his family. I stood at the back, listening. It felt like they were talking about a stranger. Or maybe, a version of him that never existed. My mom sat in the front row, her head lowered. She looked smaller somehow, like grief had taken something out of her. For a moment, I almost forgot everything. I almost felt sorry. But then I remembered. And the feeling disappeared. After the ceremony, a man in a suit approached us. "The will is ready to be read," he said. We followed him into a quiet room. Just me, my mom, and the lawyer. The air felt heavy, like something important was about to happen. I didn't expect anything. I didn't want anything. But I still listened. The lawyer began reading. Most of it was simple. The house. The savings. His business. Everything was being left to my mom. That made sense. That was normal. Then came the part that mentioned me. Or rather, didn't. The lawyer paused for a moment before continuing. There is a statement included, he said carefully. My chest tightened. He read it slowly. I leave nothing to Ian. He made his choices, and he must live with them. Silence filled the room. It was only one sentence. But it felt heavier than everything else combined. I didn't react right away. I just sat there, staring at the table. Not because I wanted his money. But because even now, even after everything, he was still controlling the story. Still deciding who I was. Still painting me as the problem. I looked at my mom. She didn't say anything. She didn't defend me. She didn't question it. She just sat there. Quiet. And in that silence, I understood something. He hadn't just broken me. He had changed how she saw me too. That night, I went back to my apartment and sat in the dark for a long time. The anger I thought I had buried came back stronger than ever. Not wild. Not out of control. Clear. Sharp. Focused. Because now, I know something for sure. He had taken everything from me once. My trust. My identity. My future. And even in death, he tried to take my truth. But this time, I wasn't that scared 15-year-old boy anymore. And I wasn't going to stay silent again. Because somewhere beneath all the lies, the truth was still there. Waiting. And I was finally ready to find it. That night, I didn't sleep. I sat by the window, staring out at the empty street, replaying everything in my head. His words. His voice. That sentence in the will. He made his choices. No. Those weren't my choices. They were his. And for the first time in years, I stopped doubting myself. I knew what I had lived through was real. I just needed to prove it. The next morning, I went back to my mom's house. She looked surprised when she opened the door. Tired, too. Like the last few days had taken everything out of her. I need to check something, I said quietly. She hesitated, then stepped aside. The house felt frozen in time. His shoes were still by the door. His chair still pulled out slightly from the table. It was like he had just stepped out and would walk back in any second. But he wouldn't. And that gave me something I never had before. Freedom. I started with his office. It was the one place I was never allowed to touch growing up. The door used to stay locked. Now it stood slightly open, like it didn't matter anymore. Inside, everything was neat. Too neat. Files stacked perfectly. Papers aligned. A computer sitting quietly on the desk. I turned it on. For a moment, nothing happened. Then the screen lit up. No password. I frowned. He was careful with everything. Too careful. The kind of man who didn't leave doors open unless he wanted someone to walk through them. So why this? I searched slowly. Emails. Documents. Old folders. At first, it was exactly what you'd expect. Work stuff. Bills. Messages that meant nothing. Then I found a folder with no name. Just a blank space. My heart started beating faster as I clicked it open. Inside were dozens of files. And one of them had my name. My hands felt cold as I opened it. What I saw didn't make sense at first. Photos. Me at parties. Me holding drinks. Me sitting with people I barely remembered. Then I saw the timestamps. They didn't match. Some of those pictures were taken on nights I hadn't even gone out. Others were edited. Carefully. Like someone had built a story out of pieces that weren't real. Then I opened the next file. Messages. Not just his. Others. Unknown numbers. Short conversations. Clear instructions. Make sure he takes it. Don't let him back out. The school will handle the rest. My chest tightened. I kept scrolling. And then I saw it. The message that ended all doubt. The locker is done. No way he talks his way out now. I leaned back slowly. Everything went quiet. Not outside. Inside me. Because this wasn't just suspicion anymore. This wasn't just memory. This was proof. He didn't just push me. He planned it. Every step. Every fall. Every moment that made me look like I was the problem. I printed everything. Every message. Every image. Every lie he had carefully built. And then I walked out of that office, holding the truth in my hands. My mom was sitting in the living room. She looked up as I entered. "What did you find?" she asked softly. For a moment, I didn't speak. Then I placed the papers in front of her. "Just read," I said. At first, she didn't understand. Her eyes moved slowly across the pages. Confused. Uncertain. Then her expression changed. Her hands started to shake. She flipped to the next page. And the next. Each one hitting harder than the last. "No," she whispered. Tears filled her eyes. "This can't be," I didn't interrupt. I just stood there. Because this moment. It wasn't about anger anymore. It was about truth. When she finally looked up at me, her face had changed. The doubt was gone. The distance was gone. All that was left, it was a realization. "I didn't know," she said, her voice breaking. I nodded slowly. "I know." She covered her face with her hands and cried. Not quietly. Not softly. But the kind of crying that comes from something breaking deep inside. "I thought I was helping you," she said. I thought you were losing yourself." "I was," I replied gently. "Just not the way you thought." For a long time, neither of us spoke. We didn't need to. Because everything that had been hidden for years, it was finally clear. A few weeks later, things started to change. Not all at once. But slowly. My mom stopped repeating his words. Stopped seeing me through his version of the story. She started asking questions. Listening. Understanding. Then one day, she called me over again. This time, there was no sadness in her voice. Just quiet strength. "I fixed something," she said. When I arrived, she handed me a document. A new will. Her will. I looked at it, confused. "You don't have to," I started. She shook her head. "This isn't about money," she said. "It's about making things right." I read it slowly. This time, my name was there. Not as a mistake. Not as an afterthought. But as someone who mattered. I looked up at her. "Why now?" I asked. She stepped closer. "Because I finally see you," she said. And in that moment, something inside me finally settled. Not anger. Not pain. But peace. He tried to destroy me. To turn me into a story that made him look like the hero. But in the end, his own lies became the evidence against him. He thought he buried the truth with him. But he didn't. Because the truth doesn't disappear. It waits. And when it finally comes out, it doesn't just clear your name. It gives you back your life. And that is something no one can ever take away from me again.